Hello, everybody. There's a lot going on in the TCG space right now. Flesh and Blood has an update coming tomorrow, probably talking about Flesh and Blood 2.0. That's a big deal for a lot of reasons. MetaZoo has had multiple releases and has a tournament coming up with 250k on the line and a lot of other prizes. And Magic the Gathering is the strongest it's been in years. There's so much hype and money going around. And they're about to start a Pro Tour again. So there's a lot to say about that. But we're not going to be talking about any of that. No, today we're going to be talking about Genesis Battle of Champions. Alright, hopefully I haven't lost all of you by refusing to talk about all of your favorite things. Maybe even you have heard about Genesis before. Probably you've heard about it from the Kickstarter, but it goes back a lot further than that, actually. Alpha was released in 2017. That's, 5 years ago? Probably going on 6 soon. Dozens of boxes were printed for that, so, pretty small. Beta comes out after that in 2018. Hundreds of boxes are printed. Now it starts getting in stores. A lot of people are playing it locally. Welcome to Jalera was the first actual set printed out. Came around in 2019. Raised comes out in 2020. Second edition of Jalera is coming out soon. And we have Genesis, the Kickstarter bit. It's coming out in July of this year. Kickstarter just went around. That went to the printers quickly. I'm impressed. So this isn't new. It's just grassroots. That sounds condescending. I really don't mean it that way. You can find a really dedicated community of these people, and not like a Warcraft card game dedicated community, like actual people that want to buy and play this game and spread it to other people. You can find them the usual places, your Facebook, Twitter. I actually got contacted by a representative of the company through YouTube just for putting a video up a while ago. Discord is another place where there's a lot of community taking feedback. They're improving card quality in this new set because it was lacking and people spoke up and said so. There's a lot of community playtesting that happens in a very specific Discord where you can get prizes for playtesting and all sorts of things that actually go and impact the game. They ran a contest. Gosh, I don't even remember what it was through anymore. Maybe Patreon, where people could vote and suggest different flavor card text that would go on it, which is not anything like I've seen in any other game. And in fact, you have other Patreons for other games, and they're okay. They're fine. They're not for any of, I think, the major ones, but Genesis is really keyed into the community of the one that it has, and I think it's really done an impressive job with everything that it's doing. In fact, if I had to say anything, I would say that maybe they're a little too in touch with the community, and Assad's working on that. There's a lot of maybe personal issues, seems like a weird phrase, but some stuff that he's working on to kind of be more authoritative. But he's doing a great job so far, I think. Just something to work on going forward. So like I said before, it was very focused on local communities, is very focused in a lot of ways. There's a lot of slow growth, which you may mistake for stagnation, or, is this game dead? Why do I'm just hearing about it? It's, some weird Canadian company making this thing. No, that is not how I would characterize it. It has really solid gameplay to start off with. It's kind of a mixture of, like, if you took Warhammer and miniatures and put them in card game form, which, is probably honestly a lot cheaper than Warhammer is, even buying boxes and boxes of boosters. You don't get to paint anything. Well, I guess you could still do card alters. Could be fun. But it takes all that tactical, grid-based unit summoning and management and distills it down into a card game, a really interesting card game with the randomness and fun and deck building that you would have in there. In fact, it has a point system that's really similar to Warhammer in a lot of ways for deck building, and I think it's if you are a fan of those games, I would suggest taking a look. I think you'd be pretty impressed. It has a unique resource system, which instead of counting up, like I get this amount of mana, every turn I can play a land and ramp up, or I can play an aura and ramp up. It has a resource system that counts down. You're your strongest at the start, and you have to manage those resources over the course of the combat, which is really, really unique. And it's really interesting that both of those things are kind of what got me into Flesh and Blood in the first place. I'm not a huge fan of the competitive scene, but I thought that Flesh and Blood was really a solid game that had a unique system and really a different way of approaching things. And I think that Genesis Battle of Champions is a lot the same way. So I think I'm not the only one that would say this. There's a large community for a small game with competitive and casual play in mind. I've seen a lot of talk from kind of both sides of the aisle, which is something that, going back to Flesh and Blood, some games lack. I think Flesh and Blood flags a lot in not having an online, or not an online, well, we'll get to that, but not having a casual gameplay. From Kitchen Table TCG, Louis talks about this all the time. You need the casual market to be able to grow and not just have, a really small scene of competitive players. And we're seeing that organic growth of the community. Yes, you have your competitive players, but you have these casual players as well. And it's started as this kind of small and passionate little Canadian startup. As I mentioned before, I think there were dozens of box printed, then hundreds, and now probably getting in the thousands with the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter was kind of unlike a lot of TCGs that get their start of, I have an idea, a grand archive or something. I have an idea, I have some art, let's put a Kickstarter out and get this thing built. Assad took the game from the ground and built it out of his own funding, maybe private funding, I don't know, some sort of funding that wasn't Kickstarter, and built something really cool that wasn't beholden to the forces of Kickstarter, which is probably going to be its own video, but investing, collecting, all that stuff. This is not the video to get into all of that, but it started as a really focused and interesting game, and it is now using Kickstarter as a platform to build off of that and get something else out of it. So that's really unique, again, in this space. Because they have to focus on this smaller thing, they're also focusing on LGSs in a very serious way, but not in an exclusive way. I think a lot of people see writing on the wall where online play needs to be a big part of any TCG for a lot of reasons. And some people aren't getting on board, some people don't want to get on board, and I think that you see Genesis uses, like a lot of TCGs do, uses Tabletop Simulator so that you can have the fun gameplay experience without having to build out a personalized client. And you have a lot of the community worldwide online working with that, but at the same time it's very much focused on local game stores and those communities. So it's really interesting to have seen this have grown, and I think through that it's proven out that this isn't just a flash in the pan like a lot of other games are. That's just really something fascinating, I think. And I know the last thing the TCG space needs is another Magic the Gathering analogy of how this is like Magic, but I think it's really interesting that this is one of the few games that's had slow growth like Magic did a long many decades ago. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, I have no idea. It's a completely different world, but it is interesting in how it is unique and how it has spread through word of mouth. Anyway, I would love if you would go check it out. GenesisBattleOfChampions.com. I'll put a link in details below. I am, not affiliated with them in any way. I just think it's a really interesting game that, as a TCG connoisseur, or just as a player that likes to try new things, or as someone who hasn't really found their space in the TCG community yet, I think that it's really worth checking out. So please do that. And I will follow up with a video when I have product in my actual little mitts, and we'll open that up and take a look at what's inside. I think there's a lot to talk about that I haven't even said yet. The collectability aspect, there's stuff there. The affordability, oh goodness, I definitely should talk about that. It is so easy to get into this game, and monetarily. I think it really fills a space there. And the creator, honestly, is the reason why I think that this is something that will stand the test of time in some form or another, because I think Assad has a really clear vision and has a really good way of executing on that, and has a lot of really good people around him, which is really the best you can ask for in an TCG. I'll follow this up later. And so in closing, go check it out. I think it's really worth your time.